What is good, people? Welcome back to another video on 8 Count. In today's video, I'm going to be taking a look at the UFC Fight Night London Aspinall versus Blaydes. I'm going to be giving you my reaction to the fight card. As always, guys, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the upcoming content. I've got a video coming out this week, probably tomorrow. I'll be doing my picks for Nuno Peña's, the UFC pay-per-view. Forgot what number it is now, but let's get straight into this one, guys. I guess another incident, another injury, draws the curtains on another UFC main event. Last week it was Ortega. This week it's Tom Aspinall, and what a sad way to see it end. I think it was looking like it was going to be a really good fight. Aspinall with some sort of knee injury. I watched Dr. Brian Shooter's video. I definitely recommend checking out his vids on all sports injuries. Kind of goes in depth on what he thinks happened. He says it looks like a PCL tear, and that sounds bad, I guess you could say. And I think it's a bad injury in the case of Tom Aspinall as someone who relies so heavily on that sort of footwork and how, I guess you could say, fleet of foot he is. But in terms of how the fight was playing out, I know we only got 15 seconds, but it was a really weird one. I'd actually say off that 15 seconds of actions, I would have picked Curtis Blaydes. Going in, I picked Tom Aspinall. But what I thought was interesting was how Tom Aspinall came out the gates really quick. You could see Curtis Blaydes looking to counter with the hands, and it definitely would have been an interesting one. I think it's really sad the way it plays out. It really doesn't benefit anyone. I think for Tom Aspinall, this, I guess, like Curtis Blaydes said, at the end of the fight, he's a legitimate guy. I'm a legit guy. I just wanted to prove myself. And, for Tom Aspinall, that win would have been so big. That could have been title shot next. And, for Curtis Blaydes, I guess you could say kind of similar. I don't think he would have got the title shot, but definitely be looking at maybe the loser of Stipe Jones if that happens, or the loser of the upcoming title fight between I fucking forgot who it is. But yeah, anyway, I think it's really sad the way it played out, kind of upset for both guys, but it was good to see him share a beer afterwards, and hopefully we can see this fight later down the line. Hopefully Tom Aspinall can recover from his injury and he can basically get back to action as soon as possible. We'll go to the co-main event. And I saw a lot of people booing the way that Jack Hermansson fought, but in my opinion, he kind of schooled Chris Curtis. I know Chris Curtis was saying he's doing a lot of running. I felt he did a great job at using his kicks and the speed of his kicks. And, Chris Curtis isn't the biggest middleweight, and he made him pay for that. I think Curtis really struggled at cutting off the cage. I think Hermansson did a great job at using rangy techniques, and in my opinion, it was a great job. Obviously, he said after the fight he didn't want to win that way, and he knows it wasn't that entertaining. But Chris Curtis coming in as a late replacement for Darren Till, he just didn't want to lose the fight. He wanted to get that W, and I think he did it in a great job. I think I picked Hermansson coming in. I thought he was probably going to get some sort of arm triangle on the ground. Yes, I just think for Hermansson, this is a big win coming off, some of the other results in his career. I think the loss to Sean Strickland was I guess you could say it was a really scruffy one on his part. He really wasn't able to get his takedown game going, and he didn't need to tonight, on Saturday night, sorry. I thought, the way he was using those kicks did brilliant. I think his movement was great, and yes, you can consider it running, but in a sport which, yes, I guess you could say entertainment is the main factor, but that W affects the paycheck, and for him, he did what he needed to do. We'll move on to Paddy Pimler, who I guess you could say him and Molly McCann stole the show again against Jordan Levitt, who is, I guess you could say, a strange character to say the least. I know Paddy gets a lot of stick, and I think a lot of people compare him to the top echelon fighters, and I don't think that's fair. He's not at that stage in his career. He might not ever get to that stage, and that's fair enough. Not everyone is going to be the elite of the elite, but coming in against Jordan Levitt, I think a lot of people thought the grappling of Levitt was going to cause problems. I felt on the feet, Paddy probably had the more power of the two. Levitt really didn't look to engage in the striking rounds. He looked to hold Paddy against the fence and get some takedowns of his own. I think Paddy did a great job at neutralizing it in round 2, but in round 1, he was kind of, I guess you could say, a bit stuck. He started really slow, and I'm not really surprised with what he said after the fight. Obviously, what's his name? Baby Lee, is it? The kid that died, who Paddy was very close to, and also his friend Ricky dying a couple of days before the fight. You know, a lot of emotion and must have been really heavy on him. But in round 2, I thought he did a great job, you know, neutralizing the wrestling of Jordan Levitt. I think the way he went for that sort of choke really got on ahead of Levitt and kind of scared him for a little bit. And you know, the way he was able to shoot that knee, which sounded absolutely horrific, kind of dropped Levitt to the floor. He was able to get to the back, and he was able to use the legs, you know, in terms of the rear naked choke, which a lot of people don't do. A lot of people go straight for the body triangle. And for me, it comes more of a stalling position. He was able to trap the arm, which was brilliant, as he was able to go 2-on-1 then against Levitt. And, you know, Levitt really didn't stand a chance. I thought it was a great submission. I loved the teabag after. But most of all, I think what he said after the fight was the most important thing. Touching on men's mental health and here in the UK, I think he did a great job on the mic. I know a lot of people don't like him, and that's fair enough. But for me, I think that was a stand-up sort of thing to do. And, you know, very emotional. Paddy Pimblett gets another win, which I'm sure a lot of people are upset about. But I think for the UFC, they need to keep matchmaking him with suitable opponents, a little step up here and there. But nothing too quick right now, I would say. I think you keep feeding him certain sort of level of fighters to, you know, build him up in his career, and also keep building up the sort of hype around him, because this guy definitely brings eyeballs to the sport. And, you know, he is definitely, I guess you could say, a product now of the UFC in which they can rely on to sell fights. Move on to Nikita Kryolov versus Alexander Gustafson. This fight was a sad one for me, and I guess you could say the time out the ring, potentially the chin of Gus, really played a factor here. Kryolov did a great job of jumping on him and getting the finish, but, you know, for me, you know, I guess you can say congratulations to Kryolov because he did a great job, but I look at it as more as a loss on Gustafson's part. He just never really showed up, and I saw DC call him for him to retire, and for me, I didn't like that. You know, I don't think you should call for people to retire necessarily. And I don't think Gus should retire. I think this was a bad outing for sure, and, you know, it didn't look great on his part, but I think you look at the time he spent out at the octagon, it's not really surprising in a way. For me, I think for Gus to come into the light heavyweight division, there's no better time than now in terms of the opponents at the top. There is no DC, there's no Rumble, there's no John Jones. You know, this is the best it's ever going to be potentially for Gus. Yes, a devastating loss on Saturday night, but for me, I still don't count him out. I still think you look at him and the skill set he's got. Does he lack that sort of maybe well-roundedness of what the current sort of set of MMA fighters coming through have? I think so. I don't think he utilizes the grappling sort of side of the game enough. I think that could definitely be something he could add to his game and potentially help him out in the future. I saw DC talking about the chin's gone, and that's definitely, you know, might be the reality. And if so, then maybe he's right to call for his retirement. But I'd like to see him at least 1 or 2 more times to, you know, before I kind of count him out. But right now, I know this is probably sounding very deluded. Yeah, I guess I sound like someone who goes, I believe in the next version of Darren Till and he's going to be the greatest fighter to ever walk. And I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that he is still a very skilled fighter. Still not past it in terms of age-wise for the light heavyweight division. Maybe he is beyond age in terms of his combat experience, but I still don't count him out. Congratulations to Nikita Kryolov. Obviously, it was a disappointing performance last time out against Paul Craig, but this time a massive win. You know, you look at the name of Gustafson, and it doesn't really get too much bigger than that in the light heavyweight division. We'll move on to Molly McCann, defeats Hannah Goldie, sorry. With, I guess you could say, another superb knockout on her part. And I think she kind of said the right things. And from what I've seen from her press conferences, she's kind of saying that, you know, she knows she isn't ready yet for Shevchenko. And, you know, she might not ever be at that level. I think she's very kind of undersized in the division in terms of athletic and God-given sort of genetics, in terms of she's got such a huge reach advantage in most of her fights. But I think what she's showing is she's a girl who is, you know, constantly improving her game. She's becoming better in some of the areas of the fight game, which she isn't the most prolific in terms of the wrestling and stuff like that. And with her striking, she's showing more of, I guess you could say, maturity in the way she's able to not rush all the time. I think at times it's important, but she does, go forward and throw in high volume and high amount of power. But at times she needs to take her time, and I think she did that brilliantly against Hannah Goldie. I felt coming in, this was a performance out on the feet. Hannah Goldie was going to be a suitable matchup for Molly. I felt that in the grappling, I didn't know if she had necessarily anything special to kind of offer Molly, which she hasn't seen before. And for me, I felt that Molly just did a great job. I think moving forward now, I'd like to see a bit of, sort of progression in her opponents. She's talking about Antonina Shevchenko, and which would be a really fun fight. Obviously, Antonina's not like the top level MMA fighter like her sister. But I think she has a set of skills which is going to make it a difficult fight for Molly, especially with the reach and her sort of kicking ability. It would be an interesting one. We're going to see sort of the same old Molly coming forward and applying that pressure in that fight, and I think that'll be a really good one, and I hope they make that. I think she's talking about maybe a December fight. She wanted Madison Square Garden, but she wants to stay on the same card as Paddy Pimler. But it was a great win for her, and her sort of, I guess you could say, star power is going up, and I think fair play for her. She's had such tough times in the UFC before, and now it just seems to be going on the up. Next fight, Paul Craig versus vulcanozamia in a fight which was pretty goddamn terrible. Paul Craig looking to get this one to the ground, but he's looking to pull guard every time. Doesn't really have that takedown game. On the feet, I wanted him to use more kicks. I felt like that was the key for him to win this fight on the feet, and to keep Vulcan at range. He didn't really. He looked to trade hands a couple of times, and I'm going to say this now. I know vulcanozamia is a dangerous guy at 205, but for me, his striking isn't at a level where it makes him an elite guy, in my opinion. The power definitely is elite power because of the way he's able to shut people off with such short distance strikes, but that striking was super sloppy, and it was a horrible fight, in all fairness. I think for Paul Craig, I said it coming in, it was a kind of a ridiculous fight to take in terms of he's fighting backwards. He was on a massive win streak. He should have been going up against someone like Anthony Smith, in my opinion, where it might have been even worse of an outcome in this, especially in the striking rounds. I think Anthony probably would have took it to Paul Craig, but he should have been fighting for that next opportunity, not fighting backwards, especially with the streak he was on. And Vulcan picks up the win. I felt at times he wasn't even playing to his strengths. It was just weird. I didn't like this fight at all, and I think Paul Craig in the future, he's got such, high level jiu-jitsu, especially off his back. He needs to find other ways to get this fight to the ground. I think you look at other fighters. I think he could, look at potentially using the clinch and that sort of scenario to get the fight to the ground. I saw someone talking about his takedown and takedowns on Twitter, and someone said, well, Maya didn't have great wrestling, and someone commented back, but he had great sort of, trips and that in the clinch, and I think that's completely right. I think Paul Craig, he's got this thing because he's British, he didn't grow up with the wrestling, but I don't think it's somewhere where it wouldn't, I think he'd be able to pick it up. I think his striking is, far down in terms of levels of other people. I think his kicking game is probably what suits him the best. His hands look kind of slow and robotic at times. But I root for him, man. I really like him as a character. He seems like a great guy. I just hope he can add these pieces to the game, which, are currently missing, because in terms of the UK and, someone in those higher weight classes, he's definitely someone who always comes to put on a show. Yes, it didn't work out this time and it was kind of a shitty fight, but I'm not counting him out either. I still think he's got a lot of room to improve. And if he can do that, it makes him a dangerous guy in this division. We'll move on now to the prelims. Probably won't touch on every fight. Ludovic Klein beats Mason Jones in what was a kind of Mortal Kombat style ass whooping. Mason Jones, pretty local to me. I think he did the right sort of things here, looking to apply the pressure on Ludovic Klein, but he really lacked in that sort of speed department to, compared to Klein. Obviously, Klein coming up from 145, and some of the kicks was like movie-like, the way he was doing some of those jumping round kicks and stuff like that. I was really impressed with Klein. I think Jones made some mistakes in the third round. I think he was looking for a flying triangle, but just basically pulled guard, and he was allowing Klein to just control the fight but I think you got to give credit to Jones there as well, at least going for broke. He got dropped a couple times, but never showed any quit. And, I think he is a level behind Klein at the moment. I think there's still room for him to improve as well. He seems like a nice guy, and I hope he can put something together. And, he's had some fights in UFC where he's looked very good, and I think this was definitely a big up in terms of level of striking of his opponent, and it made it very difficult. But I'm not counting him out either. I still think he's a fighter. I think the odds are kind of crazy that he was a minus 390 to plus 320 of Ludovic Klein. Mr. Highlight gets it done, and it was an impressive win on his part. And it's going to be interesting to see how he kind of fits in this sort of lightweight division, because obviously he is a smaller sort of lightweight in terms of the frame and height. He's pretty stacked though, considering that. He's kind of reminds me of Fiziev in terms of his body, sort of way it's shaped and stuff like that. We'll move on now to Marcia, who gets another dominant win against Damier Hadzovic. For me, I think this was another showing of Marcia, and I mean, people expect to see him and see these flashy strikes, but in my opinion, what he's got now is he's definitely improved on areas of the game where he was weaker. But for me, it's the mental strength which has really improved for him. He's got a game plan. He goes in there and he's able to put it together. At times, he looked kind of lost and he was throwing for the sake of throwing, and he was losing fights because of that. But now, I despite it being, not a great fight to watch, it was an impressive performance. And, for Marcia to now be on a bit of a streak, I think this is only going to give him more confidence going forward. Nathaniel Wood pieces up Charles Rosa. I'm a big fan of Nathaniel Wood, the prospect. Have been for a while. He's had setbacks in his career in the UFC. I think of Casey, and John Dodson. But now coming up to 145, you can see he's definitely got the smaller frame. But which is going to separate him from everyone else is that fucking speed. He is so quick. And, Charles Rosa, he's got a good grappling game. His striking game was nowhere near the level of Wood, but you got to give so much credit to him because he never said, I don't want it anymore once. He went forward. He never quit. He had a guillotine in tight at the end of round 2, but in terms of the stand-up, Nathaniel Wood's just levels above. And I can't wait to see what's going to happen with him moving forward, because he's such an exciting guy. I don't think he's like that shit talker on the mic, which probably would improve his brand and, give him more visibility. But I think for the sort of hardcore fight fan who sees him and you see Nathaniel Wood's name on the card, you're excited because he's special, in my opinion. I could see him making waves here at featherweight. It's going to be interesting to see, though, if he comes up against someone who's got that sort of weight advantage and, that dominant wrestling game, especially at 145. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Marwan Mirkhani versus Jonathan Pierce. Pierce with the finish in round 2 via TKO. This was I guess you could say, unsettling sort of result with me. I like Marwan, and Jonathan Pierce, JSP, just put it on him. I think Marwan came out early. And for me, for someone with so much experience, I was kind of confused by his sort of, the way he kind of rushed the fight. He didn't take his time like he normally does. He was straight after. He wanted the takedown. He wanted the ground control. Pierce was able to sneak in some really nice elbows and cut up Mirkhani during that exchange. But, Pierce took his time. I forgot the saying now, was it? Something to storm. Anyway, but, he kind of went through the storm and he was able to, absolutely batter a really fatigued Mirkhani in the second round. I think in terms of name value, it was a great win. for Pierce. And coming forward now, I think that's a great name to have on your resume. Mohamed Makhachev defeats Charles Johnson in, despite not being the greatest fight, it was a really sort of, I guess you could say, it was interesting watching the wrestling as someone who hasn't grown up with that sort of wrestling in your face like you guys do in the States. It was really fun to see. For Makhachev going forward, I'm excited to see what he can do. I think on the feet, he's an exciting guy. He has a lot of power for 125, and his wrestling game is sort of so unique in the way he's able to chain things together. The way he was able to go from the back to get in some suplexes, in on the single leg. It was a great performance from him. It wasn't the most, I guess you could say, pleasing fight in the eyes. However, I did enjoy it personally, seeing some of his wrestling techniques and the way he was able to kind of dominate Charles Johnson on the ground. For Charles Johnson, I think coming out of this fight, yes, he got dominated, never really had a moment to show what he was bringing. His takedown defense was brilliant, despite being taken down, I think it was 9 or 10 times. I think his ability to scramble back up to the feet was also brilliant. I think there's no shame in losing to Makhachev, especially, you know, the sort of credentials he has in such a young career. I think I'm interested to see what Johnson does going forward. I hope he's still in UFC because I think he's an interesting guy. His wrestling seems to be, you know, pretty decent. So it's going to be interesting. Joy Herbert, big win. Super happy for him. Run through the last 3. Mandy Bone was, you know, she looked scary, but really horrible performance on her part. And Nicholas Dolby, very impressed with him. He kind of does a similar sort of result to JSP in the way he was able to overcome Claudio's sort of dominant first round and just put it all together in the final 2. So an impressive win for him. Overall, guys, I think this was it was a decent card. It had some fun fights. It was nowhere near the level of UFC London from, you know, earlier on in the year, but it was still a really fun experience to have the fights on at a good time for me here in the UK, not staying up and, you know, just kind of watching these fights despite not really knowing what time of day it is. But thank you for watching the video as always, guys. Please leave a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the upcoming content. Like I said, I've got my sort of picks coming up now for UFC 277 probably tomorrow or Thursday. Be sure to check those out. As always, guys, I hope you have an amazing rest of your week and day. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.